Hey everybody, good evening and welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. I'm Greg LeBoff. I got Coach Dustin, Coach Brad with me. As usual, tonight 7:30 live. We go live every 7:30 on Facebook and Facebook and YouTube is where we broadcast live to. So thank you for joining us. And hey, before we jump into tonight's episode, it's going to be a good one, but I just want to ask you real quick, if you haven't already, take a few seconds. Don't forget to subscribe or like, and if you can, leave us a review. If you feel we're worthy of it, 5 stars would be amazing. That is how we reach other good men just like you, other protectors, other people who want to weaponize against violent criminal assault to protect themselves, their families, and other innocent people. It takes you less than 90 seconds. That's the only ask I have. We don't sell shit. We're just trying to help educate people to a process of how they can better prepare themselves and choose safety first. So listen, tonight's episode, we are going to talk about for fear of escalation. This is something that I've come across lots in so many of our clients over the past 3 decades. People often have a fear of escalating a situation. Well, tonight we're going to separate fact from fiction. We're going to dive in. Hang with us. Back in 30 seconds. I can't wait to go deep on this one, guys. And my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just... All right, we're back. And while the intro was playing, I went to take a sip of my tea, and I think I just got second-degree burns in my mouth. So that might slow down my talking tonight, but we'll see. Anyways, listen, tonight we're going to talk about for fear of escalation. You guys have heard it over the years, obviously, and I have, as I stated before the intro, that so many people, I call them the big 4 dominoes, right? There are subconscious barriers that prevent good people from actually stepping into the role that they want, meaning that in a dark critical moment for themselves or their family, when we're talking about violence and potentially facing grievous bodily harm or death at the hands of violent criminals, there can be these barriers that subconsciously stop somebody from taking action. Now, if you ask these people, if you just ask them right now, today, in this moment, what would you do? Would you defend? Would you, fight for your life? Would you protect? Oftentimes the answer is yes. Now, there are a few people that say, listen, I don't know. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but many people say yes. But despite that, when they find themselves actually in the fucking moment, shit is happening fast. It's chaos. You are operating off of imperfect information, needing to often make split-second decisions. That can be the difference between living and dying. And not only your life, right, but the life of your family or the life of other innocent people. And in that moment, that is fucking intense pressure. And these subconscious kind of conflicting values, beliefs, or false beliefs that people can have can cause that fraction of a second of hesitation. We talked about whatever it was in the last couple podcasts. We talked about the reaction model. It can create a mental stall. Okay, so one of the things that for fear of escalation, I want to address and try to knock down some of these barriers, right? It's by separating fact from fiction. So let's do this. I'm going to start by making a statement, and this isn't going to be the end all and be all answer to tonight, but it is a very powerful statement that people really need to unpack. A moment of rudeness doesn't turn a good man into a violent one. Okay, so let's just break this down for a second. If we find ourselves in a conflict, okay, in that conflict, we have to stand up for ourselves. Now, I say it that way because obviously there's conflict. There's some sort of disagreement. There has to be, otherwise it's not conflict. That means that if we take the opposite side, so somebody is rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent, whether that's through action or behavior, okay, physically, verbally, whatever it is they're doing, and we stand up to that. Most people, one of the things that demands is that you're going to have to, at least for the moment, appear to be rude or appear to be potentially even aggressive or confrontational yourself. That's what it is. Conflict has one guy on one side and one person on the other side. Now, there's lots of things that we can do to try to alleviate that so we don't enhance this me versus you conflict and escalate it. But I said this because this is where people get paralyzed. Oh, if I did this, if I said that, then that could, escalate this shit. But just understand on a fundamental level that even if in that moment you appear rude, you appear aggressive, you appear confrontational, that does not turn a good man into a violent one. Right? And that's super important for people to understand. So I want you guys just to chime in on that real quick, what that statement means to you.
Well, since Brad's not going to go first, I agree 100%. I think it kind of comes down to, like, not it doesn't come down to it, but one aspect of it is capability is a part of what you're talking about, in the sense that if you have somebody who's capable of being violent, then they're capable of being violent. If you have somebody who has no desire, willingness, to become violent, what you do or say is not going to change them from one end to the other. Does that make sense? So, like, they may not be violent in that moment, but if the capability's there, it's there. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what you're saying. If you have a person who's not capable of violence, just because you upset them, yeah, you might make them angry. They might get louder. They might yell more. They might, all kinds of different, physical cues and things are going to change for sure. But it won't mutate them into a violent person. That's already there. So you can't take onus for that and put it on yourself. It kind of goes back to that podcast where we talked a lot about kind of transferring your own moral code onto somebody else.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, you can't morally change that person by standing up to them. Either they're capable of violence or they aren't. And I think that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well said. Perfect. Yeah. Brad, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I have a ton to add. I think the only thing that, and I know this is something we've talked about before as well, is that understanding that violence moves in a linear progression, right? So it's either going to progress to escalation up or it's going to de-escalate, right? So it's like, but that's going to happen. And again, if you kind of think about how violence progresses, and you think about even what Dustin said and then what you're saying, Greg, is like, well, then if they were going to progress it, and that was going to happen anyway. And if it was somebody that was not violent in their nature, then it probably wasn't going to escalate upwards to a violent situation. Do you know what I mean? So doesn't mean it can't, but I'm just saying for...
Yeah, what you're talking about is what's their nature, right? The core of this is that you don't turn a man into a violent man. Like, you don't all of a sudden create this violent nature in him. He already is one. He either is or he isn't. And when we're talking about that escalation scale, we're talking about violence escalating in a linear fashion, and it's either mutating and going up and moving towards a crisis where things become physical, or it's going to de-escalate. Yes, there are strategies, tactics, and tools and things that you can do to help de-escalate the situation, and there are some things that you could do that can, unfortunately, unwittingly, unwantingly escalate things up. So is it possible to escalate a situation? Yes, of course it is. What we are saying, though, at a base core concept, you do not turn a good man into a violent man with this momentary rudeness or with being confrontational or whatever it is. That is already in them. Now, under enough compulsion, man will kill. Right? Under enough compulsion. But there are so many different variables. Demands of authority. There are anonymity. There are so many different factors that go into that, that have to be in play to get somebody to do something that is against their nature. And so why I'm separating this from the beginning of this conversation is most people have this idea that it's a comment. Literally, a guy says something to me and I say, like, fuck off, man. Which is not what I would recommend saying. That is not a tactically sound thing to do. But if you just said, fuck off, that guy all of a sudden pulls a knife out and slits your fucking throat. And people are like, holy fuck, what'd you do? Oh, you said, like, no. That guy already had it within him. That was his nature. That was the animal you were dealing with. So to me, it's almost like, let's step back for a second and recognize that we can find ourselves in confrontation against rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent individuals, but there are different species of animal that we're talking about. You can find yourself in a situation with somebody who's inappropriate. That would be like the lowest, right? Rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent. So they're rude or they're inappropriate. Those are the two lower level ones. But the dude's a fucking great white shark. right? It's a different nature. He has used violence. Maybe he has, already, in his lifetime, his predisposition is he's beat people. He's used the tool of violence to get what he wants. He doesn't have any of the emotional intelligence and coping mechanisms to understand how to process his shit, so it expresses in violent, destructive, toxic, corrosive, and septic ways. And so this guy's out there and he's being rude, but his nature is what? His nature is that of like this fucking, great white shark, just fucking hunt, kill mode. Okay? Or you can find yourself in a situation with an aggressive or violent individual who happens to be aggressive or violent. They're acting, behaving, whatever, aggressive or violently, but they're not a great white shark. They're, I don't know what kind of fish, they're a fucking tuna. Right? They're not aggressive in terms of like, they're not man eaters. They're not, you know what I mean? You can, but they're having that off day. Now, under enough compulsion, that type of person can still obviously pose a threat and even a threat of death. But we have to at least look at the nature. Okay? And that's I mean, maybe a silly analogy, but that's where this conversation has to start. Because, go ahead, Dustin.
Well, I was going to say, like, in case this helps some people get on board with what we're saying, it's like, what if you flip it? Okay, so take a violent criminal, someone who's fully capable, ready to kill someone without a second thought. Like you said, you cross them the wrong way, they'll pull out a knife and stab you. Well, how confident are you that if you're just really nice to them, you can change the nature of that person? 100%. Most people are going to be like, no way. I don't like those odds. What's the difference?
Exactly.
It's the exact same thing, just flipped.
100%. 100%, right? And matter of fact, if most people, what you do is say, I'm just going to be really nice to them. I'm going to mind my business. I don't say nothing. I'm just going to fucking, like I said, be super polite. That to the great white shark is blood in the water. Because you are fulfilling their predator optics. They are looking for food to eat. You just fucking threw on some fucking barbecue sauce and went walking in the woods. You know what I mean? Like when, fucking bears are, fattening up before winter.
Yeah, they're not looking for hard targets.
Exactly.
So if you present yourself as like, no, I certainly wouldn't put up a fight or any kind of resistance.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
100%. 100%. Okay. So we have that part, I think, hopefully set up. Okay. So now let's go to the next step that I think is the next important piece of this puzzle. I think you just have to break this down and understand that for any scenario that we're talking about, we got to look at it. There's two different possibilities. And this is important to this conversation. So the first scenario is that you're already the target. You are on the X. You are the target. You are the intended victim of this confrontation. I'm not saying of this murder. I'm not saying of this. I'm saying you're in it. So the conflict is you're there, right? That's important because now we're looking at it going, well, I'm already fucking in it and I'm worried about escalating it even more. The second scenario is that you're the bystander. You're the witness. You're not in it. Okay? But why this is so important is because if you are witnessing something, you just happen to be walking by and you see this confrontation, or it's happening at the table next to you, at the restaurant you happen to be at, or while you're out at the park with your kids. But when you are the bystander, the witness, there is also this fear of escalating, right? You say, well, if I say something, if I do something, what if then, this escalates it? Or what if they turn to me? So there's that fear again. So we can have the fear if it's us in the situation. Geez, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I come off too aggressive or too submissive? Can this escalate it? So we end up doing nothing. Or I'm the bystander and same scenario. What if? Okay, so having said that then, and I've already labeled out a couple of them, but what are the fears? And like I said, I've already set out a few, but one of them is if you're the person in it, you're on the X, you're the target, you're the intended victim. The fear is if you say something or do something, then that can escalate it. Now, I don't think this is going to take a lot of unpacking, but if I say something aggressive to the person or if I say something contrary to what they say. You know what I mean? They're like, what the fuck you looking at? And so what do I answer? Do I say nothing or what's it to you what I'm fucking looking at? Like, do I say that? Would that escalate it? Do I not say anything? Do I say, I'm not looking at anything? I'm just enjoying my day? Like, so right off the bat, you see where these fears start to come in. Well, what's the right thing? What's the best course of action? If you're the bystander, then you're like, okay, well, that person be yelled at. Somebody should say something. Hey, man, hey, you guys, can you just watch the language? I got young children. There's young children here. Should you say that or shouldn't you say that? Should you say, hey, man, just leave? Why don't you just leave the guy alone, man? He's not hurting anybody, just minding his own business. Why don't you just leave him alone? Do I say that or don't I say that? And then you say, well, I'm just going to ignore it. It's not my problem. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, walk away caring about my day. And then later you find out that the guy was stabbed 5 times and dies. Do you carry a piece of the trauma pie from that? Do you carry any sense of guilt with that? Or is it literally just, well, fuck yeah, that's why I didn't say nothing. Then you use that as evidence that you did the right thing by not doing or saying anything, which may in fact, okay, maybe that was good, maybe it was the right thing, maybe it was the wrong thing. The point is that why this needs to be addressed is when our actions are dictated by fear of what could be versus having the actual understanding to deal with what is. That's the fucking problem. So if you walk away and go, I didn't say or do anything in that other than remove myself from the vicinity of the threat, that can be the best thing in the world to do. That could be the smartest thing in the world to do. And you should have zero guilt with that. But you don't really know because what was the catalyst that drove your action? Now, for a lot of people, they wouldn't give a shit. They're like, I don't give a fuck. It was the right thing. I'm home. I'm alive. That was the right thing beyond question. Okay. You are okay with that. You've made peace with that. That's fantastic. I'm happy for you. For myself, just speaking for myself, that's all I can speak for, I would have a tremendous amount of guilt. Why? Because I've been the victim of an attempted murder, and my violent beating at the hands of 3 turning into 8 violent criminals was spectated and watched by 150 plus people that did nothing. And I didn't ever want to be the guy on the ground. I didn't ever want to be the target of the victim. But I equally don't ever fucking want to be the guy standing in the crowd feeling fucking helpless and doing nothing or running away because of fear or because of a lack of knowledge or understanding. If a situation is happening and I deem it the best thing for me to do because I'm actually reading what is happening in the situation is to remove myself and remove as many other innocent people as I can and remove my family and get to safety. And I know that was the most prudent, strategic, and tactical thing to do, then I'm okay with that. If I knew that it was to be the very best fucking witness that I could be. Keep myself safe, be on the phone to the police, be a witness, writing, documenting, all that. If that's what I knew I could do, then I'm okay with that. And if I knew that there was something that I could do to at least potentially help save the life of an innocent person, then I'm okay with that as well. But how do I differentiate? Well, that's through the education. I can't have this fear of escalating something, right? Or this fear of what could happen. I have to be able to see what is happening and then make an educated decision. And I just as an analogy, and I'm probably intercepting you, Dustin, because being our analogy guy, you're probably about to make an analogy like this. You'll probably still improve upon it. But in every other aspect of our life, when it comes to our finances, I don't just close my eyes and throw a dart at a bunch of investments I've pinned up on a wall, and wherever the dart lands, I don't leave it to chance. We educate ourselves. And if we don't know what to do with it, we educate ourselves enough to find somebody who we trust that knows what the fuck to do with it, right? In every instance, we tend to want to go into things with our eyes open, educated. We want to try to make smart decisions. And the way you make smart decisions is by understanding something. educating, understanding, deep diving is seen. We might not be the masters of it, but you have to have a functional working base of knowledge, at least enough to find somebody who you trust that does, who then can help you in that process, right? So I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but that's the next step of this is to understand that part of it. I don't know if you guys want to add something to that or we'll
You know what? I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and I'm just like, there's so much depth to the conversation and the subject matter. Like at first glance, like it's we're talking about how a temporary rudeness will not turn a good man violent, and then when we're talking about what we would do in our situation, and there's a lot of depth and a lot of self-reflection, like that has to come in the front end of a lot of the situations that we're talking about, because we're even touching on identity and beliefs and values, like it's all in this conversation. So it is very, very deep, and it's like, I just like, if people are watching and listening, it's like you have to see, like, I'm visualizing as you're talking, I'm visualizing myself in a lot of where you're kind of painting that picture, right? So it's just that's all I just want to point out. Like you don't want to gloss over like the actual meat of what we're talking about.
100%. Okay. So how do we do this? Here's the thing. There's two things I believe. One, you got to stay in the moment. Like almost every crisis that could ever happen, natural, mechanical, or personal, you have to stay in the moment. And when you stay in the moment, you have to be grounded in the facts. If you're not in the moment, you're not going to be grounded in facts. You're going to be caught up in the emotional backstory of what's happening. All this shit that's going on. Okay, all of the inconsequential fucking details. I've said this before, but professionals, the difference between professionals and amateur in any field, and if you deal with first responders or people like that, professionals have the ability to thin slice. What are the important details? Firefighters show up on the scene of a fire or of an emergency, and as they are rolling up, with first glance, they are already able to determine what the core ingredients are. They are already able to best predict what the fire is doing, what it is most likely going to do in the next few seconds or next few minutes, and therefore they are able to instantaneously thin slice the best strategic and tactical response to that situation. Amateurs get overloaded by trying to recognize all of the stimulus simultaneously. There's this point and this point and this point and this point. So they come up with 100 points of data and they go, well, off that, there's 200 possible solutions. Pros, people with experience, don't do that. They go, yeah, there is 100 points of data, but there's only 3 that fucking matter at this moment in time. And those 3, there's not 200 different responses. There's fucking 1. This is the smartest fucking thing to do. And so they start doing that. And so their response is fast. In the moment, you can be grounded by fact, and you have 2 things that are happening. One is you are able to recognize the mission demands and thereby come up with the mission commands. The other side of that is you are caught in the pontification, in the posturing, the backstory, the emotional fucking swirl of shit that's happening. And if you're in the emotional pontificating swirl of the backstory, you're going to be thinking about all the shit that could happen, and you're going to enter into the fear loop. And then you're going to be out of control. So now's when you're going to do shit that has the potential to escalate the situation. Because none of it is appropriate, because none of it is based off any stimulus. It's not based off any fact. Right? It's based off fear and emotion and irrational thoughts and being too far in the future or being stuck in the past or whatever the fuck it is. Mission commands and mission demands. Here's how you really get rid of this fear. You do what needs to be done because of what is currently happening. In the situation when you are doing that. I'm not saying there's zero chance of the situation escalating. I'm saying there's zero fucking chance of you unwittingly, unnecessarily escalating that situation. Because, and here's the thing, and I'm just going to throw this point out there as a scenario maybe we can run with. I had a client last night, Nathan. I'll give a shout out to Nathan when he listens to this. But we just had a conversation about carrying a knife. Now, a knife is a tool. It's all it is. It's a tool. It's matter of fact, it's man's oldest tool. It can be used for a lot of things, one of which includes the preservation of life should I find myself under attack from either a four-legged or two-legged predator. That's just one of its applications. I can equally use that tool to open up a packet of hot dogs while I'm camping, right? But it is a tool. So now the question came up, said, well, listen, you carry this knife, a situation, an altercation or something happens, and this knife comes out, and you bring it out as a deterrent. So you bring it out saying, listen, I don't want any trouble, leave me alone. You have this knife, you're hoping that the visual impact of them seeing this knife causes them to de-escalate or back off or whatever, and they leave the situation, and thereby you are avoiding having to use the knife or having to get into any type of physical altercation altogether is, let's say, the hope, okay? So now the conversation kind of swirled around this. But isn't that, like, you carry this knife, you pull this knife out, geez, could this not unwittingly escalate the situation? Or maybe even more pointed, wouldn't it just escalate it? If you're out and all of a sudden there's this confrontation and you pull this knife out, is that not just going to fucking escalate this situation? Well, let's go back to the points we've already made. One, what is the nature of the person you're already dealing with? Right? Is this the type of person that the second they see a knife or any type of tool that you were using in a defense situation as a deterrent at this point? Right? But when they see that, are they like, yes, now you're speaking my fucking language. Like, now I got my fucking knife, or now I pull my gun out, or fuck you, my first instinct is, my nature is to take that away from you and shove that through your fucking neck. Well, we're already dealing with a certain type of human being here. Would the visual of this knife take a good man who's clearly under some form of stress, right? Because he's not having a very good day, whatever it is, or he's intoxicated. Something has altered this good man. But is the sight of this knife enough to take that good man and turn him into a sociopathic, homicidal murderer? Does he then be like, nah, fuck, I have my knife too, you're going to pull that out, and now you've got two good men in a murderous knife fight. Okay? But my thing was this. First off, let's if you're going to do these what ifs, you have to be very, very careful. It's okay to say, listen, here's the scenario that I'm imaging. But you got to stay grounded in what is probable, not what is possible. Because anything's possible. Possible is fucking fantasy. Or possible includes fantasy. Probable is what is most likely to happen. What is and how do we know that? Well, what did the statistics tell us? What does researching violence tell us? Like, if when you're in this, like we are in this, I mean, every single day I'm studying criminality. There's at least half an hour, if not an hour of my day that goes into studying criminality. Meaning what? Meaning that I'm going through news reports. I'm going through criminal court cases. I'm reading transcripts of what happened in these assaults. How did these people get victimized? How did their attackers get them? Right? Or how did they not get them? How did these people defend themselves? What was done? What was the preamble? Like, all of this stuff is being done. So it's not a stretch for me to go, well, listen, this is how things are happening. We have to be grounded in probability, not in possibility. Okay, so the second we do this is say, okay, here's the thing. If you have this knife, which is just a tool, but you have this knife, and so you pull this knife out, right off the bat, why? Why did the knife come out? So let's actually break down the story. You asked a question. Hey, if I pull this knife out, I just pulled it out as a deterrent, and then it escalates. Like, or would that not escalate it? Okay, stop. Why did you pull it out? Now, you guys, we've not talked about this, right? You weren't there for that private the other night. So let me tell you something. I say that to you. I come in and say, hey, guys, I have my knife. I always carry my knife. It's just a tool, but I find myself in this situation, and so I pulled my knife out. Now, my thought in the beginning is I pulled it out as a deterrent, hoping that they would scare them, back them off, and so then I wouldn't have to, use it or defend myself or find myself in a physical altercation. What what do you, like? I know right now what you want. You want to know why. What can you guys, from your perception, come up with? What are the reasons why I would take the knife out?
Well, I think first and foremost because you believed that you were facing potential imminent and gross bodily harm or death.
Okay, I'm just going to pause you right there, and I actually want you to repeat that. So why did so when we hear that story, right away I pulled my knife out, and right away you go, okay, so the knife came out, so clearly you were, and repeat that for everybody.
You believed that you were facing imminent gross bodily harm or death.
Perfect. Now, a couple things there. You said that I believed, meaning that the onus
don't
on
know.
me was it reasonable for me to believe that I was facing imminent gross bodily harm or death? Was it reasonable? Not was it factual. Like it later on in a court of law, it might be proved that maybe I wasn't. But in that moment, what was it reasonable? Okay, so now the second part of that then is, Brad, could you give me a few ideas of what I might have seen that led me to believe that I was facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death? What could I have possibly seen prior to them trying to murder me? What could I have possibly seen that led me to that reasonable assumption?
Yeah, you could see a breakdown in their communication and an escalation in their physical body language, right?
That's two.
So if you're going through like your body language, your communication, and your behavior, so
Perfect.
all those,
Yeah, finish your thought on that. Wrap that up. Yep.
yeah, just all those things are going to be the pins that you're looking for to read the situation.
Yeah. So
So
what
when
do
Dustin
pins? What do pins mean? People don't know what pins are. What are pins?
the pre-incident indicators of what level of threat is currently in front of me. So when Dustin said, "Yeah, I would pull my knife out because of this," is like he saw the escalation of these three areas: the communication, the behavior, the body language. That is like, this guy's going to try to kill me.
Okay. I want it for the cheap seats. You're actually telling me, just so I'm hearing it right, I'm going to paraphrase it back to you. One of the most powerful parts of communication is to paraphrase it back to you. You're telling me that me, just plain old me, right? I'm not no superhero and shit. I'm no super cop. I'm no super soldier. Plain old me, there is actually a way that I can learn to measure aggression and violence and escalation in somebody else. And from what I heard, there's 3 specific ways and areas that I can learn to do that. And could you just repeat them for me again? Because I need to write this shit down. So what were they again?
Well, matter of fact, Greg, there is.
Fantastic.
There's 3 areas of study. There's the communication, there's the body language, and there's the behavior.
The body language and the behavior. Fuck,
Right.
that is revolutionary.
Can I jump in
Dustin.
really quick, just with a super fast story that pertains to this 100%? Because it was just so neat to see it, because it's like it's what we're talking about. But a couple weeks ago, I was taking my daughter and her friend to like a family dance thing in Edmonton, and so we were kind of downtown Edmonton, and it's not like in the greatest areas. Not that it had anything to do with anything, but we're driving down the street, so we're doing like 50K going down the street. I got 2 11-year-old girls with me. As we're going down the street, there's a couple standing on the sidewalk. Again, 50 kilometers an hour. We're not at a red light. We're not sitting there. And this guy is motioning at this woman. And within seconds, my daughter's friend says, "Oh man, that guy is mad at her." Boom. We drive right past him.
Yep.
An 11-year-old girl doesn't even have training in any of this. Couldn't hear anything. Like you said, split seconds to see the body language, the behavior, the proximity, and instantly she's like, "That guy is so mad at that woman." And I'm like, beautiful.
Yep.
That's exactly what Brad's talking about.
Yes.
And that's an 11-year-old with no training.
Yes.
Well, there is. We all have training. It's just
all have
it's life
training, yeah.
experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just pointing it out for people. But.
Yes. Now,
So
in that same, let's take that scenario. And all of a sudden, that woman, as you're flying by, you see her hand reach underneath, let's say into her purse or underneath her jacket, and all of a sudden you see a knife come out. Now, in that situation, would she not have been able to tell that she pulled it out defensively because how aggressive this guy was? Like, was it reasonable? I bet that 11-year-old, if we asked her, you say, do you think that that guy laid his hands on that woman? Do you think that he hit her, grabbed her, and then who knows what after that point? Do you think that's reasonable or was that unreasonable? Do you think, which way, what was the event horizon that you saw building? I bet she would say, oh yeah, if it was going any which way, it was going up. It was moving towards a physical confrontation. It was not de-escalating and going down. She would be able to predict that with one of the tools that Brad, like a magician, gave us. Right? Just pulled that out of thin air. Like he fucking gave us 3 ways to measure. Like that's amazing. But with one of those tools, just the body language, I guess a bit of the behaviors in there too, so maybe 2, but she was able to decipher this. So does it not stand to reason that that woman who's in that situation could also have potentially read that, took the knife out, not only as a deterrent. And remember, what is a deterrent? Really, when you talk about self-defense, understand that every action that we take is preemptive. Side caveat, right? Oh, whoever throws the first punch is the one that's guilty. That's the one that's going to get it charged. That's the one who incited the fight. Wrong. Bullshit. Lies. Total fucking fabrication. Like, it's just such fucking horseshit. When somebody is verbally, mentally, emotionally abusing you and escalating to the point when it's about to become physical, right? The attack is already underway. So if you pulled a knife out as a deterrent to say, that woman pulled that knife out, backed up and said, stay the fuck back. Don't fucking touch me. Just let me fucking go. I just want to fucking leave. Okay? She is preemptively stopping the assault. You do not have to wait. If he fucking punched her in the fucking mouth, or broke her jaw, or knocked her out, or got his hand around her neck and started to choke the fucking life out of her, it's often too fucking late. That's reactive. That is why the law recognizes, okay, that there is no reaction faster than action. So if imminent grievous bodily harm or death, if that is reasonable for you to believe is about to happen, you can and should, and matter of fact, must stop the attack with your own attack because it's already happening. So see, when my client was talking about the fact that, if I pulled the knife out as a deterrent, would I not then escalate it? If you pulled a knife, it was already escalated. Providing you're actually in the moment dealing with facts. Not some guy looked at you, called you a bunch of fucking names, but couldn't give 2 shits about you, but he was really rude. You got fucking scared, shit your pants a little bit, and then pulled the knife out going, holy fuck, man, you better, you're now having a fucking very disproportionate reaction to stimulus, threat cues, pre-incident indicators that are non-existent. They are fiction. They only exist in your mind. And you're going, but if I didn't do it then, it could, those indicators could have happened. But were they happening? Yes or no? Were they happening? No. And that's a very important distinction. Most people think that it needs to be the physical assault is the only indicator that would then justify you picking up a tool to defend yourself. But what if there was 2 attackers? What if there was 3 attackers? What if there was 3 or 4 attackers and one of them had his hand underneath his front of his jacket? As if to say, I've got a fucking gun. And as he's doing that, one of the other guys is taking his finger, pointing it like a gun, and saying, I'm going to fucking shoot you. We're going to fucking kill you. Now, maybe the guy pointing his finger didn't even mean to make a finger gun. He was just pointing his fucking index finger, and his fucking fat thumb happened to be out. And his buddy standing 3 behind him happened to have his hand down the front of his pants like Al Bundy scratching his balls. And maybe this is all just fucking coincidence. But when you're sitting there looking at this, surrounded by 3 or 4 guys who are threatening your fucking life, the body language, the fucking behavior, and their interpersonal communication, it's pretty fucking reasonable, at least by my level of sanity, to assume that there is imminent grievous bodily harm or death on the horizon. So at that point, if I picked up a tool, a rock, right? If I pulled the knife out, if I fucking took my belt off, pulled my jacket off, had a sweater in my hands, had a coffee mug in my hands full of hot coffee, any of those things, it would be pretty fucking reasonable for me then to need to use something like that, considering the fucking mission demands, the facts that are staring me in my face, grounded in the moment, in the reality, and use that as maybe my strategy is, hopefully the sight of this, me holding the belt, me holding the hot cup of coffee as if I'm going to throw it on him, me holding the knife, is enough of a deterrent. Maybe it won't be. And I'll just add another little caveat here. Don't ever fucking bluff. Don't ever fucking bluff. That doesn't mean that when you take out or pick up a tool in defense as a deterrent, it doesn't mean that I'm saying, oh, fucking use it for sure. If you pull it out, you use it. No, I'm saying don't ever make it a fucking bluff. If you picked it up and you were using it as deterrent, say, do not do this or stop this or this. That's what you're saying, whether you say it or not. The second you pick it up and you hold it in your hand that way, you're saying, don't do this or else. You better be ready for the or else. Because they will fucking tell. They will just tell by your intention. And if they call your bluff, right, you're fucked. Okay, so it is not a bluff, but I want to keep it on point. That was a little side caveat. So this is where we're back to again of like, for fear of escalation. Well, if you understand how to read aggression, then that's understanding the mission demands. Then whatever actions you are taking in the moment, I would put forth that they are a necessity. And if it is a necessity, and I act on that mission command because of the necessity, and that then causes an escalation that is not on me, then that is a combination of factors. That is the nature of the motherfucker that is threatening your life. That is the nature of the group. That is the state that they are in. That is whatever, that is the predisposition of their life up until this point. That is bad fucking, like whatever the fuck you want to put with it, because I am only doing what is necessary in that moment. A police officer is not or should not be pulling his gun when there is no need for that. And like a guy's walking across the street jaywalking. And a traffic cop whips his fucking gun out and, rushes up to the guy and fucking, he comes up at a fucking level 10. Now, if that guy's jaywalking, but the police officer sees something about his body language that leads him to believe that there is far more sinister things at play, to everybody else standing around, they only see a guy jaywalking. But to a trained eye, they see a potential terrorist threat. They see a potential domestic. They see something happening that demands, and they operate off the facts. Now, would we say that that was unnecessary escalation? Or do we say that that was fucking appropriate, and that's why that officer's still alive, and that's probably why some other intended target is still alive, and that is why the criminal has been apprehended or dealt with, or whatever the case may be. I threw a lot of stuff out there. Fill in some of the holes, guys, or throw some comments back of things I might have missed or you want to clarify.
Just one thing that kind of hit me, and I don't want to get off topic because we're not talking about denial tonight, but I think just to point out for people like acceptance, and this sort of fits with what you were saying, Greg, about being in the moment, recognizing the mission commands, what are the facts, what's actually happening. And I think denial can kind of seep in there for people. So I think it's just important that people understand, like, yeah, you just have to accept that it is happening. Accept it's happening. Like we always talk about improv comics, right? The best improv comics are the ones who just accept whatever's given to them, whatever's put in front of them. And it's no different when you're dealing with violence. Like, whatever's in front of you, you have to accept that it's there. And then again, ties back into not transferring your moral code onto somebody else. It's like you have to take them at their word, at their behavior, at their body language, all the things Brad talked about. And so you just have to accept it is what it is, and you have to just deal with that. You can't be trying to convince yourself, well, maybe this and maybe that, and that ties into that whole fear of escalation thing. Like you can't get caught up in that.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Brad, anything you want to throw down range on it?
Yeah, you know what? Just one point really is we talked about being in the moment. We talked about the body language, behavior, and communication, and being able to read aggression and understand what it looks like and how it progresses or degresses. But there is zero way that you could be in the moment if you don't know what the moment looks like, right? If you've never seen, if you've never studied criminality, if you've never seen violence, which we all have, if you do what I mean, like you have to know what the moment looks like. You have to understand body language, behavior, and communication. Because if you don't want to be trying to like. What's going to happen is you're second guessing yourself, and then that's when you're making judgment calls of like, well, I'm going to pull this knife out, and hopefully it bluffs him and goes away. It's like, yeah, but this guy was high on the escalation, and he was a violent criminal, and that's not going to work. But you didn't read that right. Because you don't know how to be in the moment because you don't know what the moment looks like. So I just want to emphasize like this is a huge part of weaponizing. It's a necessity because you have to understand what's in front of you because if you don't, you can never be in the moment.
100%. Very, very well said. And I'm gonna throw a couple things here because I love what you guys said. I'm gonna highlight the points because I want people to have like a cheat sheet of things, right? One of the first things too, because we've been talking about like mission commands, mission demands, seeing things, reading things, all that type of stuff. Remember something. The other side of that, the opposite of that, is the posturing. It's the pontificating. It's the fact that if we lose emotional control, that sucks us out of the moment. Warriors, protectors, in crisis, anybody in crisis, any responder has to be in the moment. They have to be in control. I'm not saying you can't be scared. I'm not saying you can't feel some fear and some anger and some, there's all these emotions. We are emotional creatures. You are going to feel it first. The emotional system is the first system to be impacted. And then that feeling becomes a thought. And then that thought impacts our actions. So when we have these feelings, we have to understand these feelings and know how to regulate them. That's the inner control box. What are the tools? What's the self-talk? Right? What's your cognitive counter, cognitive counter interrupt? How do you redirect negative thoughts? How do you get rid of stinking thinking? How do you, use self-talk to step up and enhance performance? Like there's all these tools that we teach that are taught so that when we find ourselves in crisis and we feel fear and we feel anger and we feel fucking desperation or humiliation or whatever these things, these myriad of things that we're going to feel because we are human and they're going to be fucking intense, we can regulate our response. So much so, or enough, that it allows us to stay grounded in the moment. One of the biggest things that I think even I probably underestimate this, and maybe you guys do as well. But how effective the training is and how much work goes into it ain't fucking personal. One of the most personal things, right? Again, this is a bit of a tangent, but there's 3 types of crisis. The natural, the mechanical, and the human. The natural, tornado rips through your house. A mechanical, you have a car accident or an injury at work. And then the human crisis. The difference is the mechanical, the car accident or the accident at work, and the natural, the tornado ripping through your house, even if it kills, maims, destroys everything you love, hurts you, injures you, whatever, there's a massive difference between that and the human crisis. Because the human crisis is somebody at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the fucking morning making a personal decision to end your life. That's the difference. And yet what I just said was that in the training, you learn to separate something that is so fucking personal. To be debased and dehumanized by another member of our own species to the point that we are so worthless to them and so undervalued to them and viewed as so different to them as a subspecies almost, that it's easy for them to take our lives. And yet, when that energy is in front of you, when that threat is there, that interpersonal human aggression is there, it's not fucking personal. It is an energy that is a danger, imminent, immediate danger to you and your family, and you need to neutralize that energy. Now, that energy might be neutralized long before that energy is terminated, meaning they are no longer a threat because they are incapacitated somehow. They get hit in the head with the brick and they're staggered back 5-7 feet and they're a little bit, discombobulated, and we're already the fuck out of there. But the point was, when they got hit with that rock and we saw that we had a gap, we had a moment in time where these people were off base and off balance and safety was only 5 feet away or 10 feet away, we took that opportunity to move to safety. Why? I have no interest in punishing. I have only interest in defending. The line between defending and punishing is very thin sometimes. So part of the training has to be, this shit ain't personal. Recognize when it's a threat, and when it is a threat, we need to deal with the threat. But the second it's not a threat, at whatever stage that is, it's not a threat, get the fuck out. It is over. It is not personal. We do not go into punishing. Okay?
Can I add?
Yeah, of course.
You know what, yeah, you made, that's a really massive point, because even just thinking about it now, is that through the weaponization process, when we are talking about being in the moment, and looking at the pre-incident indicators, the body language, the behavior, the communication, those things, you're looking for those in that moment. That is why you're in the moment, because you have the educated eye, right? And then you're not sucked into the backstory. That's where things get personal, because there's how many times we talk about this, it's oh, people are why is this happening? They get stuck in that loop. Oh, why is this happening? What? They can't get an idea because they're attached to the personal element of it, and they're attached to the backstory. But when you're in that moment, it doesn't matter what the fucking backstory is. We talk about that all the time. It matters of what's in front of you, and really honing in on being in that moment, identifying those threats, identifying those pre-incident indicators to make sure that you could stay in that moment. And if you don't have that educated eye, it's so easy to get sucked in why me? What's the backstory? And then you get caught in that loop, and that could kill you.
100%. 1,000%. That is correct. So, inner control box. Then Dustin talked about acceptance. Accept it. It's horrible. See it for what it is, not worse than it is, right? That's what it means to be real, is to see it for what it is, not worse than it is, and accept it. Don't transfer your moral code. It's really big, right? It is human nature to imprint our values and beliefs onto other people and operate with the expectation that they reciprocate those values and beliefs. And when it comes to violence and violent criminals, they do not. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about your values. They don't give a fuck about society's rules and laws. They just don't give a fuck. Okay? And then remember that when you are in the moment, seeing the mission demands and moving on mission commands, everything that you're doing, whether it's you having to pick up a tool, whether it's you having to relay injury onto somebody, or whether it is you using verbal de-escalation tactics or just removing yourself by running or using the environment, whatever it is because it was necessary. It was necessary. It was necessary for your safety and for your survival. And then my last point on this, if it's necessary, then I think we can agree that we must do it. But understand that just because it's necessary and I do it, and I do it well, and I do it with conviction, doesn't mean it's going to work. And I mean that in the sense that it doesn't mean that it's going to automatically bring about the end of the situation. It doesn't mean that it'll automatically de-escalate the situation. It doesn't mean that it's going to give you automatic, easy, guaranteed safety. It doesn't mean that you're even going to survive, or that your family will survive, or that other innocent people will survive. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't come with guarantees. All it means is that it was fucking necessary. And it can be the difference between dying with your fucking boots on, doing and protecting for all of the shit that you believed in, your way of life, or dying on your fucking knees at the mercy of some sociopathic piece of shit who doesn't give a fuck. Never has, never will. You're not the first and you won't be the last. Doing what necessary is not easy, but it is what's fucking necessary. And that's just a fucking dose of hard reality that also comes when we train this. And that's why I need to be able to recognize what is actually happening. So that if I make the decision to get the fuck out of there and take as many innocent people as I can, or if I make the decision to be the best fucking witness I can and to try to create a barrier and mitigate as many casualties, but I'm unable to do something for the direct victim or victims, then that's what is necessary. Or if it is having the ability and recognizing that what is necessary is to enter into harm's way and stand up for what I fucking believe in, even at the risk of my own life, then that is what is necessary. And I'd rather take the risk of potentially dying, but do it standing on my own 2 feet than doing it on my knees. That's not how I want to die, and it's not how I want to live. And so this whole conversation of fear of escalation, I mean, it's like all our conversations. It's fucking three-dimensional and it's deep. And I don't sit here for even half a fucking second saying that everything we talked about tonight is the end-all, be-all, and these are the answers. It's a very deep conversation with lots of different angles and perceptions. And at the end of the day, we are just human beings not working for perfection. We're just human beings working a process and doing our very best to weaponize and to be as prepared as we possibly can be to be a life-saving force in a dark, critical moment for ourselves, our families, and other innocent people. And that's the best that any of us can do. But it is a process that I believe good men need to work. And, and that's, I guess, probably just as good a spot as any to wrap this up. So I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that or not, but I think
one final comment that fits with what you just talked about. And it's like, look at the banner above our heads right now. The name of this podcast, it's not an accident.
Yeah.
It's not a fluke. Do you know what I mean? We're not all sitting here every week talking about how great guns are or how great a jab cross combo is or an arm bar or an elbow or any tool. Like, it doesn't matter because it's all about the education. It's everything you're talking about. You want the absolute best chance at surviving violence. You got to understand violence. You have to have an education in violence. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And that also is, again, why we're putting out the time and energy and effort. We're not selling shit. We don't want something. We just want to share the process to get more people having a conversation. And you might disagree with us. You might agree with some of what we said or whatever. The point is we're having the conversation. And everybody will be infinitely safer by the fact that we're having a conversation about it. And we're doing it on this side because criminals talk. Criminals have conversations. They're figuring shit out. They share plans, tactics, and strategies. And they laugh at good people because they don't have a fucking clue what that world is like. We are having that conversation on the opposite side. So, Brad, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you guys wrapped it up pretty well. So I'm good on this one.
Okay. All right, everybody. On that note, then, we will leave it here for tonight. Please join us every Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. We go live. If you can join us live, that's great. If not, please, wherever you get your favorite podcast, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, don't forget to check us out, Education of a Weaponized Man. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, share, give us a rating if you feel we're worth it. 5 stars does more than you could ever know to help us reach new listeners. It is our goal to help educate and weaponize more good men. And that is our sole purpose here. So until next time, everybody, please stay safe, stay weaponized, and we're going to chat again soon, everybody.